In this lesson, you'll learn what environment variables are, what they do, and how to create as well as delete them. An environment variable is a storage location that has a name and a value. They often affect the way programs behave. For example, in earlier lessons, you learned how to tell various programs about your preferred editor by setting the editor environment variable. The easiest way to view all the environment variable names and values is to run the prentenv command without any arguments. On your screen, you can see an example of this. Each line contains the environment variable name, followed by an equal sign, and then the value of that environment variable. For example, the environment variable hostname is web01, since that is the hostname of the system that I was logged into when I ran this command. This is an example of an informational environmental variable. Another example on your screen is the path environment variable. This is an example of where the value of the variable affects how a program behaves. In this case, the shell uses the path to determine what paths to look for commands to execute and in what order. If you change the path environment variable, you change how the shell operates. If you want to look at the value of one specific environment variable, you can pass its name as an argument to the prentenv command. If you were to run prentenv home, then only the value of the home environment variable will be displayed. Just like most things in Linux, environment variables are case sensitive. If you were to execute the prentenv command followed by home in all lowercase letters, nothing will be returned because there is no environment variable named home in lowercase letters. By the way, environment variables are uppercase by convention. You can create lowercase environment variables, but you will rarely see that. Another way to display the contents of an environment variable is to use the echo command. With this method, you need to prepend a $sign to the environment variable name. If you want to look at the contents of the home environment variable, you can run echo space $home. Again, environment variables are case sensitive, so trying to echo the value of $home in all lowercase letters will not return a result. When you create an environment variable, use the syntax of export followed by the environment variable name, followed by an equal sign, and finally the value you want to assign to the variable in quotations. Do not use spaces around the equal sign. If you do use spaces, you'll get an error. Run export space editor equal sign quotation mark vi quotation mark to create the editor environment variable and assign it the value of vi. Some commands look at the editor environment variable to know which editor to start. By the way, if the editor environment variable already existed, this would override its contents. So this is not only how you can create an environment variable, it's also how you can update an existing one. Another example is setting the tz variable. Here, running export space tz equal sign quotation mark US/Pacific quotation mark sets the time zone to US Pacific time. The date command, for example, will return a different result depending on the value of the tz variable. Let's say you no longer need or want an environment variable. To remove it from your environment, run the unset command followed by the environment variable name. For example, let's say we want to rely on the default time zone of the system instead of overriding that with a tz environment variable. So we remove it by running unset tz. The act of setting and unsetting environment variables from the command line affects your current running session only. If you want to make your settings persist between logins, you'll want to define your environment variables in your personal initialization files, like the .bash_profile file. You use the same syntax as you learned, so if you want to explicitly set your time zone, then you can add an export tz line in your .bash_profile as shown on the screen. If we want to see what environment variables are configured, we can run the prentenv command. If there are too many environment variables and they scroll off your screen, you can pipe the output to a pager utility like less. Now I know what environment variables are configured in my environment. If I want to look at the value of just one of those variables, I can use prentenv or echo. Let's look at the path. So we can run prentenv path, which will display the contents of that environment variable. Or we could use the echo command, echo, and this time we're going to prepend the environment variable name with a $sign. So $path will return the path. Let's look at the current time with the date command. Now let's set our time zone by changing the TZ environment variable. Set this to US Pacific time, and I'll run date again. And then now you can see it's 11:14 instead of 14:14 because in the Pacific time zone, it's currently 11:14 a.m. Now let's try removing the TZ environment variable and see if our time zone is set back to the default. Now when we run the date command, we're back in the US Eastern time zone because that's the default set on this particular server. Let's say that we always want to display the time in the US Pacific time zone. To make this setting persist, we're going to add it to our bash profile file. So I'm going to use the VI editor because that's my favorite editor. You can use Nano, Emacs, or whatever editor you like. And then I'm going to edit this file, bash_profile in my home directory. And then I'm just going to go to the bottom and do an export here. Export TZ equals US Pacific. And now I'm going to write and quit, save my changes. I'm going to log out of this system. There we go. And now I'm going to connect back in. So now let's see if the time zone variable is set. We can do echo $TZ. And sure enough, it's set to US Pacific. And if I run the date, it is in Pacific time as well. By the way, you usually can tell what environment variables a program uses by looking at its man page in the environment section. Let's do that now for the date command. So if I run man and the command, which is date, hit enter, and I can look through the man page here. And if I get down to the section here called environment, I will see it has one environment variable listed, which is capital TZ, which is the environment variable we've been working with. And it says here that it specifies the time zone unless overridden by command line parameters. This is how you can tell what impact an environment variable will have on a given application. In this lesson, you learned that environment variables are name-value pairs that can affect the behavior of an application. You also learned how to view your environment with the print env and echo commands. Additionally, you learned how to create or update environment variables using the export syntax. We talked about removing variables from your environment with the unset command. Next, you learned how to make environment variables and their values persist between sessions. Finally, we talked about how you can find what environment variables a given program uses by looking at its man page.